5 scores! Rick Bond.
We decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Bond, Gary Neville.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan, and joining me as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how's the training coming?
Pretty good, actually. I went out. It's paying off now. I went out and shot a nice, smooth 76 today. So
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your training.
No, what's going on?
You're going to get a tryout with the Duchess over 60 hockey team if you get yourself in game shape.
Oh, hey, I'll be ready for that. Trust me. I'll just eat wings and stuff until then, and then I'll still make the team. The
contract could be sent you tonight. You just passed the story. Okay, a little smooth 75 today. Yes, I know. Good round. Your game's getting back into form. Well, listen, our guest today enjoyed a 10-year pro career after going undrafted. Signed with the Maple Leafs in 1984. Had stops in Buffalo and Philadelphia, was a physical player throughout his career, very involved with the Leaf alumni, does lots of charity work, visited the troops overseas, one of the good guys of the game. Please welcome to the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show, Kev Maguire. Kev, how are we keeping these days?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Well, considering everything that's going on, we're doing okay.
Cool. Well, how else are you occupying your time? You have a contracting business or something, don't you? Did you work with?
Yes, I'm with a company called Argosson Projects, Inc., and we're a construction design, large-scale construction buildings, shopping centers, everything under the sun we do, condominiums, big cottages in Muskoka, we do it all. So I'm vice president of Argosson and happy to be there.
Well, we're going to take you back in time here and see what your memory's like, and we'll go back. We do have Squid and I have some issues sometimes. We cheat because we have notes to go through some of these things. But speak to your early years of playing hockey. You're from Toronto, but ended up playing for the Aurelia Travelways in the Tier 2 Junior A League. How'd that all come about and lead you up to there?
Well, I played minor hockey for Bert Robinson from the age of 6 to 10. And we didn't have a car growing up, so about 10 years old, I went and tried for the Marlies. They wanted to sign me, but the problem was getting around because we used to take the TTC bus to back and forth to Keelsdale Arena. So at the age of 10, my hockey career finished until I was 18. And then I went out with some buddies and played North York Juvenile League for Humberview. Mm-hmm. Played 2 years there out of Downsview and Habitat Arena. And got a letter in the mail from Aurelia, which was a Junior A Tier 2 team up in Aurelia. And I didn't own any equipment. What I was doing was borrowing one of my buddy's equipment. So the weekend I was supposed to go up to Aurelia, I went to go borrow his equipment, and he had lent it to somebody else. So I showed up at training camp, no stick, no bag, no nothing. And I went to register. And they said, "Kid, you're not taking this seriously, obviously. So why don't you just get your stuff and get out of here?" And I said, "Come on, there's got to be some extra equipment kicking around. You can find me something." And the owner of the team, Bill Smith, just happened to be walking by at that time, and he inquired what was going on. And they said, "This kid showed up with no equipment, no sticks, and he wants to try it." And he had a little conversation with me. He asked me why, and I told him what was happening. And he said, "Well, you drove all the way up here. Let's get you on the ice. Put some equipment on this guy and let's see what he's got." So I went out, and you can ask anybody that's played the game. It's very hard to play in somebody else's equipment, different skates. And so I went out there and I was stumbling around the best I could, and I got in a little tussle, which apparently was the tough guy of the league, and kind of taught him a lesson. And then played Saturday and the Sunday in training camp with Aurelia. On the Monday, I was an apprentice sheet metal worker. We were building the Granite Club in Toronto, and I was working for my dad. So I said I had to leave to go back to work. And they're like, "No, we like you. We want you to stay the rest of the week." And I said, "No, I have to go back to work. My dad will kill me and I'll be out of a job." So I went back to work, told my dad what I did on the weekend, and he said, "When did you start playing hockey?" And I said, "I was just doing it for fun with some buddies, and I went for this tryout, and they want me to go back up." And he said, "If you leave, don't bother coming back looking for your job if you don't make it." So later that day, unbeknownst to me, 4 of the scouts, Jimmy Hibben from Dean Chandler, he was mixed in with the Pickering Junior B Club. I can't remember all the other guys' names. Greg Zimmerman, who was a fire chief, they showed up at the job site, wanted to talk to my dad, and convinced him to let me go back up to Arroyo to finish my tryout. And then from there, I got a scholarship to Bowling Green, which I was very happy about because we ended up going to the Centennial Cup in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, 7 games out there. That was a battle. But over the course of the summer, I started getting offers from Jersey, Toronto, and Montreal. So I just thought it would be the best thing in the world to get a shot to play for the Leafs. So I ended up walking away from the 4-year scholarship at Bowling Green and going to training camp with the Leafs. And luckily, made the team. They sent me to St. Catharines for a couple of years. Well, St. Catharines and then a little bit in Newmarket. And then eventually ended up getting called up. And my very first game as a Leaf, there's somebody on this screen in the morning skate who decided to take a slap shot. Great. Hit the goal post.
Hold on. Let's go through everything.
He has a different version of this story.
He does have a different version.
First NHL game in Detroit.
Yes.
Because I remember it. I remember it differently than you do, a little bit anyway.
Well, you've already declared that you don't have a great memory. Yeah, but that was my first, I guess your initiation to the NHL in the morning skate, taking a slap shot from Ricky Vive right in the head and spending the whole day in the hospital. Then about 5 o'clock in the evening, I heard this voice. "Where is he? Where is he?" And it was John Brophy roaming the halls looking for me in the hospital in Detroit. And he opened up the curtain and said, "I didn't call you up to sit here and have a nap all day. Let's go. We got a game in 2 hours." And the doctor came in and he said, "Excuse me, he's got a head injury. What are you doing?" He said, "You sign him out or you're going to be lying in that bed." And he just kind of shoved the doctor, grabbed me, stuck me in a cab, and off to the game I went. My head was out to here. I looked like the Elephant Man.
So now,
what happened in the game? Take us through the game, the opening face-off and everything that happened in that game.
Yeah, so Brophy and Brof, he started me. I had no name on the back of my jersey because back then they didn't get the names on too quick. They had to send them out to get them done. Nobody knew who I was, and I lined up beside Gerard Gallant. And he looked at me. He said, "What the hell happened to you? What are you doing out here?" And I told him, I said, "I got hit in the head with a slap shot this morning on morning skate, and Brof came and dragged me out of the hospital, put me in the lineup." He goes, "How do you feel?" I said, "I can't see. Like I couldn't see out of the one side of my face, and it was all swollen. I think I had like 30 stitches. Pretty concussed." And I said, "Look, when this puck drops, I'm going to give you a couple whacks because I can't see straight. I can't think. I shouldn't even be out here." So Gerard Gallant, being the great guy that he is, the puck dropped. I cross-checked him to the ice, whacked him 2 or 3 more times. The ref blew the whistle, gave me a 2-minute penalty for cross-checking. So on the way to the box, I looked at the ref. I said, "What do you got to do to get thrown out of this game? I shouldn't be out here." So he said, "Call me a certain name, which I can't repeat." So I called him a nasty name, and he kicked me out of the game. So my whole first game probably lasted 10 seconds.
Squid, what do you think of watching all this?
Well, I mean, I knew what kind of shape he was in. I mean, I remember the morning skate. And what I remember, though, is he was over in the far corner, and I'm on the right side. And I kind of was waving to him to get back a little bit, and he didn't move. And anyway, so I took a slapper, it hit the post, ricocheted off the post, right square in the forehead, cut him for, 30 or 40 stitches. And then in the game, I just remember the opening face-off and him going to the box and then getting kicked out. and thinking, like, thank God that happened because, he was in no shape to play. But, I mean, that's Brophy. That's the way he is. And he expected him to play and go out there and fight and everything else. And I'm just glad that it happened that way because I think it would have been bad for Kevin had he, kept playing in that game.
I was going to go back to the Aurelia period when the Leafs signed you. You didn't get a shot at the O, but the Leafs to come out to did Claire Alexander coming from Aurelia have any influence in that? Because he was actually the coach in St. Catharines at the time, I believe. And you're a good-sized winger, but what was your thought process going to your first pro camp?
Going into the Leaf camp?
Yeah.
Well, I remember I worked the whole summer on top of Maple Leaf Gardens for Dean Chandler Roofing. Remember that big white rubber roof they had with the Leaf logo? Well, I put that on. And I was telling the crew all through the summer, I said, yeah, I'm going to have to quit when we get about mid-August, early August. I'm going to start training. I'm going to go try out for the Leafs. And they all thought I was a crackpot. Here I am working all summer as a roofer. And then, so the time came, and naturally I went down and I said, I got to quit. I'm going to go try out for the Leafs. And they actually believed me. So those guys, that crew that were building the roof, came down. Every day I was on the ice to heckle me from the Grays. But I found it really hard. I didn't train hard enough that first summer. And Bill Waters was my agent. And I remember him calling me saying, how's the training? How much are you skating? And I said, I haven't really been skating anywhere. I've been training, but not really getting a lot of ice time. So he set me up with, he called Claire Alexander, and Claire Alexander knew a fellow named Doc Lyons who owned the House of Chan restaurant. Mm-hmm. And he had a pro skate going at Upper Canada College. So I went out, I believe it was Tuesday nights, and skated with these ex-pros. Shaky Walton was out there, Brett Gallagher, the Dillon brothers. There was a whole bunch of guys. Guys that were big corporate guys that I didn't even know of at the time. Timothy Eaton played. A whole bunch of different.
They still play, by the way.
Yeah, that skate is still going. I know that. With my buddy George Silva and a whole bunch of guys. So I started skating with them, and I found out pretty quickly how fast the difference was, or how fast the pros were compared to the guys, especially in Tier 2. It was a step down from the OHL. So probably skated with them a few weeks. Then I went to training camp, and our first training camp was in Belleville. Oh. Yeah, you remember that, Ricky.
Oh, yeah.
The biggest ice surface in Canada. And we had Dan Maloney and John Brophy as the coaches, and they just whipped us. And we skated, and we had a fellow named Jim Korn back then who was in incredible shape. And they kept putting me in skating drills with Jimmy Korn. And he was just a horse. So, it hurt a lot. I was cramping up like crazy. I remember we had this Coke fridge in the locker room, and I kept drinking grape juice afterwards. And I got really crampy and really sick, and it was just training camp was really hard for me. And I was rooming with Walt Podubny, and the team had a game in Quebec, an exhibition game. And then I think it was actually Squid, Billy Derlago, Johnny Anderson, a couple of guys. They said, well, when the team goes away, if you're not on the trip, the rookies got to take the vets out and buy them dinner. So me, Stevie, Craig Muni, Cam Plant, there's a few rookies. We went out for dinner with these guys, had a couple beers. Lo and behold, they do a curfew check, and we're not in. So Craig Muni got sent home. What was the other guy? His brother was the GM of the Raptors at one point. Forget his name. But two guys got sent home, and they kept the rest of us, and they said, well, you're going to go to St. Catharines. You really have no shot making the team. But we like you. We like Stevie. So we went down to St. Catharines, and, we learned the trade down there, which the American League was really tough back then. But I learned pretty quickly how good a shape you got to be in to be at that level.
Squid?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. But that training camp in particular was probably one of the worst that I've ever had. And of course, back then you got to remember that we went twice a day. I mean, we went for 2.5 hours in the morning and then 2.5 hours in the afternoon as well. And that particular camp, I remember Terry Martin got salmonella poisoning February before and missed the rest of the season because he got pretty sick and lost quite a bit of weight. And then he came, that training camp that year, it pretty much almost killed him. And then he ended up getting traded to Minnesota, I believe it was. But that Dan Maloney at one point took the water off the bench as well. So you couldn't even go to the bench for a drink of water.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're skating laps on this Olympic-sized rink like crazy. I mean, it was just, when you think back and you think about that training camp in particular, like, and comparing it to, how they train today and everything else, I mean, it was just ridiculous.
It was. A lot of guys got hurt. I think they were just competing. It was Brophy and Maloney didn't like each other, so they kept trying to outdo each other with drills. But it got to the point where there was no ice left behind the nets because we were skating so many laps, so many times, that it was just almost pure cement behind the ice, behind the net.
Oh, it was the worst training camp I think I've ever been at, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, do you think that not having a tier 1 junior background, that hamper you somewhat and put you back a little bit behind the 8 ball, like in the eyes of the guys you're competing against and maybe the coaches?
Oh, definitely, for sure. I didn't have, quality coaching. The thing that really benefited me is they had a thing called the Mariposa School of Skating up in Arroyo, where Brian Orser was training out of, and a bunch of the Olympian figure skaters. So Neil Carpenter and Doug Lee became friends of mine. So I stayed that summer and skated with all the figure skaters. And the following year at training camp, I was the guy lapping people because I was never taught about edges and turning and just all the different drills that the figure skaters did. I did that the whole summer with them and skated with them, and it really improved my game.
I was going to ask you, but John Brophy, you've touched on it. Obviously, him running the big team, I'm guessing it wasn't lost on you the type of coach he was and the player he admired the most. Was that an additional motivation for you?
Yes and no. I think I finished third in scoring in Tier 2A. I played with a fellow named Tony Herkus, who won the Hobie Baker Award and set all kinds of scoring records and was a great pro player. I was his line mate, I guess, to protect him in junior hockey. And we had a lot of scouts coming up to watch him. So, I fought a little in junior, but it was one fight and you're out of the game.
Well, I was referring more to St. Catharines when you got there eventually.
Yeah, well, St. Catharines was a different story because that was back in the days they still had line brawls.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to. I remember at one point, I think we had 10 guys or 11 guys in St. Catharines. The Leafs were in disarray. We were in disarray. Claire Alexander got fired partway through the first part of the year, and Brophy came in. And I thought I was in trouble. I thought I was going to get sent down to the I. And, we had, at the time, we were running the boxes at the Skydome, so we had a pretty good business outside of the ice. So if they wanted to send me to the I was just going to pack it in at that point. But I stuck it out. Brof was really, really hard on me, and Ricky knows this. He wanted me to succeed. There was something that he saw in me, and he pushed me and abused me. But if I didn't have somebody like that back then, I probably just would have went back to business.
Squid?
Yeah, one of the good things about Brof, and I know a lot of people didn't get along with him or don't like him, but Brof, when he liked you and wanted you to succeed, he did whatever he could to make you get there. And like Kevin said, he was probably very, very difficult on him and sometimes abusive, but that was only because he liked him and he wanted to see him succeed and get to the National Hockey League.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with all that in mind, you head to the 86 camp, and you probably know where I'm going with this, to fight with Wendell. Take us through that. I mean, I know it didn't turn out well for you, but did you just set your mind that you were going to make this Hockey Cup, you have to make an impression, and why not start right at the top and go after him?
Yeah. So Daryl Sittler lived up in Aurelia, and he was good friends with the owner. So the owner set up a lunch for me with Daryl Sittler. We went to lunch and we were discussing on how to make an input, in training camp. And he was saying, coming out of tier 2, and they've got a lot of good players in the pro league. You've got to make an impression. You've got to get noticed first day at camp. He says, you're going to have to fight a guy like Wendell Clark to get noticed. So it wasn't preset. So Wendell and he kind of felt it coming. We went at it, and he kind of stunned me right off cut me for about 7 stitches. And after that fight, I went in to get stitched up, and Brophy comes in, Brophy being Brophy, he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm getting my face stitched up." And he's like, told the doctor, "Stop now." He said, "You get back out there, you're not missing the shift." So I went back out and challenged Wendell again. And Wendell kind of said, "Nah, wasn't interested." He went to skate away. And I reached over with my stick and I kind of wrapped it around his neck and I hauled him back and said, "No, we're going to go again." And then Russ Courtnall jumped on my back, and then somebody else jumped on Russ, and both benches cleared, and we had this massive brawl for the second time. But I think that made Brophy happy.
I'm sure it did.
To defend my honor or whatever. So that night we were heading to Edmonton, and they put me and Wendell beside each other on the plane, a 5-hour plane ride to Edmonton. And we didn't really we didn't even know each other. It was the first time we met.
Yeah.
And, you can see people walking up and down the aisle looking at us going, "What the hell happened to you two? We're all busted up, scratched." So we went to Edmonton and had a really rough game in Edmonton, an exhibition game. And the boys went out after that night. We went to a bar, and same thing. Somebody got in a fight, or the guys at Edmonton hated the visiting team. So we got into a big bar fight after that. And as the story goes, Wendell and I have become great friends ever since. I think he's an awesome guy, great ambassador, just a solid human being. But that was quite the introduction to pro hockey.
Well, I'll tell you what, if there was a brawl in the bar, then I wasn't likely there, more than likely.
Now, Squid, do you not remember that fight? You were on the other. There was 2 sets of teams, or 4 teams, wasn't it? Training camp.
Yeah, usually there was 4 teams, and you'd play like a round robin type thing. You'd go about a whole week of scrimmaging in the morning, and then doing some drills and mostly skating in the afternoon, that sort of thing. Well, even after the scrimmage in the morning, you'd do about 45 minutes of skating. I mean, I got to tell you, training camp was not fun back then. I mean, it was hard, it was difficult, and it was a grind. I mean, and if you got through that training camp unscathed and not injured, you were probably lucky, because our training camps were pretty crazy. I'm like Kevin said, there every scrimmage there was probably at least minimum a half a dozen fights.
Yeah.
So what did you hear about this one? This must have made the rounds when it turned into a bench clearer.
You know what? Well, as Kevin said, my memory's not that good, and I actually don't really remember anybody talking about it or anything. I just I remember Kevin at camp and how tough he was, and then later on when we played together, and then we played together in Buffalo, and but in Buffalo he scored a bunch of goals too. I mean, he became more of a complete player over the years, and but he still had that mean streak that you didn't want to get in his way. Let's put it that way.
Well, I was going to say, so obviously that endeared you to the coaching staff. So take us through the day, Kevin. You got the call to come to the big team.
Well, we touched on that earlier, the morning skate, but it was just before Christmas, and I think we were playing Detroit back-to-back, Boxing Day, a day off, then another game in Toronto. So, that was the best Christmas present anybody could ever ask for. Especially, I had spent 2.5 years in the minors. And the third year was not a good year. I mean, the first 2 years were crazy enough, but by the third year, I remember Val James got called up before me, and I was not happy about it. So I was thinking about asking for a trade, and I don't know what happened, but I ended up getting the call just before Christmas. And that year, I think I played 17. I was up for 35 games, but played in 17 or 18. They'd only stick me into the tough, rough and tumble games. But it was tough. Like riding the buses back then, and doing that for a living. I don't really watch any videos or old clips of me fighting, but I wouldn't want my kid to do that. It's really, really tough.
Yeah. Well, I understand where you're coming from, Magsy, because, I've got a son still playing in the ECHL, and he's 6'6", 245. So he doesn't lose that many fights, but he's had a few in the last week and a half, and his knuckles are all cut and, like wide open and bleeding. And I mean, I don't wish that on anybody. I wouldn't. I hate watching them fight, to be quite honest with you. I really don't enjoy it. And, like you said, I don't want my kid to do that if he doesn't have to.
All right. Well, on the second game, on that back-to-back with Detroit, I had the one shift opening night. And then the next game, I'm sitting on the bench. And Ricky was, our star, 50-goal scorer. And I remember sitting there, and I haven't even had a shift yet. And Brophy comes up behind me. And Harold Schneps used to always go after Ricky, cross-check him, hack him, just make life miserable for him. And he came down and he said, "You see what he's doing to your captain? How bad do you want to make this team? You see what he's doing to your captain? What are you going to do about it?" And he throws me out on the ice, and I go skating out there with a big bandage on my head. Still no name on the back of my jersey, second game. And I challenged Harold Schneps to a fight. And I did really well against Harold back then. But it was also, you broke the code because Harold was an older guy in the league and I was a younger guy. So to challenge an older guy back then was kind of a no-no. So after that, I had to deal with Probert and Kosher and all the rest of the Detroit boys the rest of my career.
Well, I was going to ask you, just go back to the American Hockey League and playing in St. Catharines, and you ended up actually in Newmarket for a bit as well. Playing at that level, you touched on it, that the frustrations are coming with guys getting called up in front of you. We've had players like Craig Muni and Steve Thomas on the show, and they were going through the same type of experience, having good years, but almost looking like they were being passed over. Did that frustration, as you just touched on, get to a point you did say you almost wanted to request a trade?
Yeah. So that final year, Paul Gardner, who was the leading goal scorer in the American Hockey League, 2 years prior to that, he was playing in Rochester and I was playing in St. Catharines, and we used to always have wars. And it was my job to shut Paul Gardner down as the goal scorer. And I was really rough on him. The next year, when he became our coach at Newmarket, he didn't like me. He didn't want to use me. He wouldn't recommend calling me up. So I was either ready to get out of hockey or quit at that point, because I knew as long as Paul Gardner was there, I was never going to get a shot. But eventually, I guess Paul changed his mind, or somebody in Toronto said, we're calling him up no matter what. But yeah, it's a little different today. There's the agents are more involved. There's more visibility. Back then, when we were in St. Catharines, there used to be a saying that it's 60 miles down, but it's 600 miles back up.
Yes. I think Kevin emphasized that to Steve Thomas one night after one period of playing in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
Well, Stevie and I lived together in St. Catharines. We were roommates. We rented a townhouse. And back then, they do the hazing and the initiation. So we both got our heads shaved down in St. Catharines. And, you're always black eye or missing tooth, something. The neighbors didn't know what the hell we were. Just these two guys, shaved heads and always full of scars. But Stevie's still a good friend of mine, great guy. I see him all the time. But I used to look after anybody who went after Stevie. Stevie was our star in St. Catharines. So I got in a lot of fights trying to protect Stevie, a lot of fights trying to protect Ricky up top. But that was the job back then. You had no choice.
Yeah. So, Kevin, when you were in the minors, you're looking at 2.5 years. How much did that help your the hockey part of it? Or did it? I mean, doing different things in practice, trying to, improve on certain areas of the game and so on. Did that really help you going forward?
Well, it did, because I didn't have, a career or any hockey experience all through my teens. So I just had Humberview juvenile hockey, where you had to pay $1.25 to get in your own game. And then I jumped up to the Tier 2, which I thought was a huge step. And that worked out well. I ended up making the pro team and the Leafs, my favorite team. But those 2 years of the minors, just to learn the trade, just to have, experience, good coaches. I never saw videos. We would watch the other team's power play, just the whole game itself, to learn the game. I think back then, more guys played in the minors, but they needed it. It was a good training ground.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up playing with the Leafs. You're up for 35 games. You played 17, but the off season you're claimed by Buffalo. How was your confidence level at that point, and how did that all kind of unfold for you? What was the role they were looking for from you, or did you know?
Well, I think Buffalo finished last the year before, so they had the first pick in the waiver draft. So I was never in a draft, but the only draft I was in, I went first overall. So that made me happy. But it broke my heart in the beginning, because I'll never forget, we were lining up to do the team picture at training camp, and we're all on the benches, and they're going to do the team picture. And I'm so proud to be in the Leaf team picture. And what's his name? Gord Stellick comes out, and he comes up. We're all lined up for the team picture, and he gives me the win. Come here, I got to talk to you. You've just been traded to Buffalo. You can't be in the team picture. And that really hurt.
Oh,
that really hurt. Just to have to come out of that team picture lineup, go by everybody, and back into the dressing room was demoralizing. But when I got to Buffalo, I loved Buffalo. It was probably the best 3 years of my entire hockey career. I loved the town. I loved the team. We had so much fun, and we had a really, really good team. I had Mike Foligno and Lindy Ruff were our captains. There's Napesy, Phil Housley. We had so many great guys in that team, and we were a really close, well-knit team. So that was a lot of fun, Buffalo.
Yeah. I got to say, Buffalo was probably one of my favorite places to play. I mean, the people there were fabulous too. The fans, the community was excellent. It was a great place to live. And I love playing in the odd, because, if you got 5-8 feet over the blue line, it was a scoring chance there. And so that was a lot of fun for me. But just the way of life in Buffalo was really, really good for family too, for my kids and going to school and that sort of thing. It was wonderful.
So now, Kev, this is usually a question that Squid asked, but I'll step on his feet here and take this one. Was there a moment or a game or an incident with a teammate or something along those lines that put you at ease, that you finally made it?
Probably Clark.
Yeah, when I hit him with a slap shot in the head.
That would certainly do it.
I think he was referring to my time in Buffalo, but the slap shot in the head woke me up. I hadn't seen that much blood come out of somebody since Clint Malarchuk.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, but Buffalo had a real veteran team, and like I said, Mike Foligno, Lindy Ruff,
Mike Ramsey.
Oh, I love Rammer. Such a
Larry Playfair.
Larry came the next year. He wasn't there the first year. Clark Gillies was there. Became very close with Clark Gillies. Drive the practice together. Parker, Alexander McGillney came along. There wasn't anybody that really just didn't like anybody on the Sabres. We'd go to lunch together as a team after almost every practice. We did everything together, snowmobiling, golfing. It was a really close team. I really
Bills games.
Yeah.
Well, no, I meant for you to ease as a player, that you finally, I've battled my way. I've got the respect of the team. I got the respect of the players. The league knows who I am. I can breathe a little bit here, that I do have a job.
Never really felt that comfortable, to tell you the truth. When you're a third, fourth line player, you're always sort of self-doubting yourself. It's hard.
Fair enough.
So probably the second year in Buffalo, I felt at ease. When I became the player rep and started going to player owner meetings, became more involved and felt like I belonged in the league. So that's probably when it full circle for me.
So
I would have to say, Mike, like Kevin's trying to explain, is back then you were a third or fourth line guy in the National Hockey League. I mean, all of those guys were on two-way contracts, and you could be sent to the minors in a heartbeat. And back then you had recallable waivers, so it wasn't that difficult to get a guy to the minors. And so I think that's probably one of the toughest jobs that the guys had to do back then was be a third or fourth liner, because every day you had to prove yourself or you were going to the minors.
No, that's a great point, because I don't think I got my first one-way contract until my second year in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And that really puts you at ease, because as Ricky said, when you're on a two-way contract, back then there was no restrictions. They could haul you up and down as many times as they want.
Yeah.
So, you're going along and things are going pretty well. And all of a sudden, the Philly situation happens in 1990 or before that, actually, before you come back to Philly, you go to Philly. Take us through all of that and what happened there.
Right. So I had met with Jerry Meehan, who was the GM, a couple of weeks before that. And there were some rumors. And he said, "Don't worry, Kev, your job is absolutely secure here. We love you. We love you." But 2 weeks later, I got traded for Jay Wells. And I went to Philly. Bill Barber met me at the airport, said, "Don't bother unpacking. You're going to get traded." It was the day before the trade deadline. "You're going to get traded tomorrow at the trade deadline for Luke Richardson." Philly wanted Luke Richardson. So there was a Philly practice the next morning. I got a call early morning. They said, "Oh, sorry, Kev, the trade didn't go through. So you're going to be here with us in Philly." Which I wasn't too thrilled about, because our Skydome business was taken off at the time. I needed to be in Toronto. I just had my first child. So I'm in Philly. I get a fax saying my wife's leaving me. So go to the front desk, calls you, says, "There's a fax here for you. You can come down and get it." I'm sure everybody in the hotel lobby had read it by then. So I went to Bobby Clark. I played 10 games there. I blew my knee out, missed the last 5 or 6. The only saving grace there was Kenny Riggett, who was like one of my best buddies, was the goalie in Philly, and moved in with him, and we kind of hung out for a couple months. But at the end of the year, I went to Bobby Clark and said I wanted to get traded back to Toronto. I can't stay in Philly. I don't want to get divorced. And he said, "Well, okay." He said something really funny about getting divorced. And he said, "Let her go," or something. I said, "No, I got to go back." And he said, "Well, in all my years of hockey, I've never had anybody ask to get traded to Toronto." So he goes, "Leave it with me. We'll see what we could do." So in the draft that summer, Philly's first pick, they traded me back to Toronto and kept their word, which I thought was a very classy move on Philly's part.
Squid?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, there were some teams that would do that, and they were good to you back then. But it's like I said, for the most part, 21 teams. I mean, the majority of them were run just like, in the Harold Ballard days. And, I mean, the owners didn't give a shit. GMs didn't give a shit. And, there's a guy like Bobby Clark who, was true to his word. And he said, "I'll see what I can do." And he made it happen. And, from what I understand, Bobby Clark was like that. He wanted everything to be good in the organization. So if you had a request, he was going to do the best that he could to honor that. But there weren't that many general managers or owners in the NHL back then that would have done that. Trust me.
So talk about the time back in Toronto now for this. Now you're coming back to Toronto, so you have a little bit more of an idea. And maybe touch on this. Talk about playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs and wearing that sweater. I mean, you grew up in the Toronto area. You knew how revered this team is held. Putting that jersey over here, how did life change for you in that regard?
Well, I was thrilled to be back in Toronto. Like you said, my dad was a huge Leaf fan, so it made him so proud. I was proud. I was raised in a family here in Toronto now. Life seemed to be great, but unfortunately at that point, where there was a lot of disarray when Harold passed away and the team going to charity, then Don Giffen got the team, and I was actually a sheet metal apprentice for Don Giffen at Giffen Sheet Metal. So I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be GM of this team one day.
Well, you probably would have done better than all the other guys.
Yeah. Don Giffen's running the team. I'm playing for the team. My dad worked for Giffen's. My brother worked for Giffen's. I worked for Giffen's. And unfortunately, Don passed away, I think 6 months or 8 months later. So Steve Stavros took over. But the team was in real ownership disarray back then. Right. I loved playing in Toronto. I mean, absolutely loved it.
So, and then you end up in St. John's. You had a couple of years there. So, and walk us through all that. Then I guess maybe then all of a sudden the end was near.
Right. So that was the second year back, I believe. Like I said, the memory might be going. I ended up smashing my back and cracked a couple vertebrae and missed, 4 or 5 months. And at the end of that year, we as the NHLPA, we went on strike. And Cliff Fletcher was the GM. And I'd been off for months and months and months with this back injury. And he said, what are we going to do? The rehab is going to be canceled, because we used to get rehab in the dressing room. We didn't go to third parties. Mm-hmm. So once the strike came, there was nothing to do. So I said, well, how about if I go to St. John's and try to get it in shape in St. John's? And he says, well, you don't have to. You're on a one-way contract. And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. So I went down to St. John's, and we took a run at the Calder Cup, lost at the 7th game to Adirondack, but got myself, I thought, in really good shape. Things were back on track. Oh, sorry, I skipped a point. Reverse back to the training camp before that. Mm-hmm. I ended up going to St. John's for a brief stint there because I missed training camp. My eldest daughter was in the hospital with really bad croup, and she was in the tent. So I missed all of training camp, and I ended up going to St. John's probably early November, and I was back by Christmas. Mm-hmm. And then I played the rest of the year with the Leafs. And I believe it was the second year. No, it was I'm trying to remember all this. It's hard. So I got called back up. We played the rest of the year in Toronto. I got hurt and then went to St. John's again for the playoff run and went to the 7th game. So I did 2 stints at St. John's, one at the beginning of the year, then got called back up. And then when we went on strike and I was coming out of the back injury, went and did the playoffs and then at the end of the year. But that was interesting because they had so much young talent there. Felix Potvin, Manderville. I can't even remember the guys you played with right now, but what a young, good team they had there. And we had a few characters too. Kevin McClellan used to be with the Oilers. He was a character, a lot of fun in the dressing room. Curtis Hunt, Joel Quenville. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed St. John's.
Well, funny enough, I do remember that year, Kevin, because I wasn't playing in Buffalo. I asked for a trade with John Muckler. He wouldn't trade me. Said he put me on waivers, and I said, yeah, recallable waivers. He said, well, it's the same thing. And I said, it's not, John, and you know it's not. So anyway, I said, I went to Jerry Meehan, who was still the general manager, and I said, listen, if you can't trade me by the deadline, send me to Rochester. I said, because, Ottawa and Tampa were coming in the next year, and I said, I need to play.
Right.
So anyway, I go to Rochester, and of course, we played Adirondack in the semifinals, and it was a best of 3, and we lost 2-1. And then I remember you guys had home ice against Adirondack. They won all 4 games in your building, and you won all 3 in their building.
That's exactly right.
I remember that series very well.
Yeah.
And Barry Melrose was the coach of Adirondack.
Yeah, they had Primo, bunch of guys. They had a good farm system too. Barry Melrose, he was hot-headed behind the bench.
Yeah.
What's the guy? We had Crawford.
Mark, yeah.
Mark Crawford, he was our coach in St. John's. And those guys wanted to kill each other every game.
Well, I was going to ask you, Kevin, highlight maybe some of the more bizarre things you saw as a hockey player playing in the minors that would just make you shake your head saying this is pro hockey. We've had guys tell us stories about short benches, so they've phoned beer league players to fill the roster, looked for any kind of goalie to step in, from trainers to equipment managers to play goal, all kinds of crazy stories like that. Anything that you experienced over your years?
Wow. There was quite a few. most of them revolve around John Brophy stories. I remember we went to New Haven one night, and it was a snowstorm. It took us about 9.5, 10 hours to get there in a snowstorm from St. Catharines. And I think we were supposed to check in by 11 o'clock at night or whatever, and we checked in about 3 o'clock in the morning. And the guy behind the counter told Brophy that they'd given all the rooms away.
Oh, yeah.
So Brophy said, "Excuse me, pardon? I can't hear you too well." The guy came over and he had a leather tie on, and Brophy grabbed his leather tie and smashed his head off the counter, knocked the guy clean out. Right? Somebody in the hotel saw it. They phoned the police. Brophy got arrested. We had to sleep on the bus. We had to give all the meal money for the whole trip, like 4 or 5 day road trip. We had to pool all our money together to bail Brophy out of jail. You can ask anybody that played in those days. And we ate pizza for the whole week. We had no money. The media never found out about it. It never leaked out. But that, there was some wild, crazy stuff like that. And just player shenanigans. We had some real guys that are pranksters.
Well, give us a couple of examples. We always love the pranksters on this show.
Oh, God. Well, probably the biggest prankster I ever played with was Lindy Ruff. He was just endless. We had a rookie on the team. They'd come in with a new dress shirt or something. While they weren't looking, he'd go in the change room and tie the new shirt into the tightest knot in the arm you ever seen in your life. Or if you're a little bit cocky, you'd nail your shoes to the floor. Just put a nail right through your shoes, right into the floor, so you'd have to walk out in the winter with no shoes on. There was all kinds. I wish I could think of a couple right now. I'll probably think of them as soon as we get off air.
That's always the way.
Yeah, that's always the way. But
while you're thinking of that, how about we've got a few minutes left here. How about getting into the refereeing? How did that all start?
Well, that's after my playing days. I was sitting in Maple Leaf Gardens. I was sitting next to my ex-wife, having a couple beers and a couple slices of pizza. And near the end of the second period, Don Koharski goes down. He gets injured, so they cut the second period short. And the crowd's waiting. About half an hour goes by, 45 minutes go by. We're almost an hour delayed now for the third period to start. So, I'm just out of the league 1 year. I said, I got to go down and see what's going on. Something's just not right. So I go down the referee's room, and Jim Gregory and Brian Lewis are there. I said, what's going on? What? And they're saying, well, Koharski's hurt, and we're waiting for a guy to drive in from St. Catharines to be the third official. And I kind of rolled my eyes, and Brian Lewis said, what, you think you could do this? And I kind of went, anybody can be a ref. It's not that hard. And then they're like, well, have you ever had any experience officiating? And I said, no. And they said, okay, we'll put you in because we got to get this game going. It was the second last game, I believe, against Chicago. And I came out to do the third period. Swede Knox went in as a referee. They put me in as a linesman. So I didn't know the signals. I didn't know the rules. I knew generally what the linesman did. But it was a rough third period, so I was great at breaking up fights and putting guys off, saying, who are you kidding? So controlled the fights a lot. So after the game, I go in, and Gregory and Brian Lewis are there. They're like, well, we can't thank you enough, Kevin. That was great. That was awesome. How'd you like it? And I said, it was great. I never usually got that much ice time in the third period before. So from there, they said, you want to continue? And I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. They sent me to Hamilton to work in the American League as a linesman. Did that for a couple of years, then converted to a referee in the American League. and then went on to do that, I think, for about 7-8 years.
Now, did you reach out to Paul Stewart to ask him, get some advice for him how to make the transition? And how did the transition go from being a player to the ref? How hard was that?
It was a little easier on me because the relationship I had with the coaches were either ex-teammates or guys that are new. And I think I got a little more respect from the players by being an ex-player than a lot of officials did, especially in the minors. But, even Ricky, when he was coaching in the East Coast League, I'm going to tell us, you were in Charlotte, weren't you?
South Carolina.
Charleston.
Yeah.
We did a game there one night, and this is how bad it was years ago. You guys lost the game, and the linesmen used to get paid cash, and we'd get paid through the NHL if you were a trainee by check. Somebody opened the door, and they threw in a whole bunch of $1 bills, program money. That's how they were going to pay the linesmen. So I picked up all these $1 bills, marched down to the coach's room, which was Ricky's room, and it was you and Marcel Dion were in there.
Yeah.
And I kind of lost it on you guys. Said, you guys think you're ever going to get a call? You're ever going to get a break if that's how you treat the officials? So next night, it was you or Marcel. One of you got us a new hotel room in a better hotel. We came to the dressing room for the next game because they had back-to-backs. There were sandwiches, cookies, pop, beer on the table, all like a professional NHL arena. So, that's just one of those stories from officiating back in the day.
Squid?
Well, the one thing that I recall is that, I know when I was there, and probably after Marcel had left, and one of the things I always did was I made sure the officials were comfortable. And whether we won or we lost, I always brought 6 beer into the room. And, I might have a comment to say or something, but I'd say, here, guys, whether we won or whether we lost, it didn't matter. It was like, you know what? I kind of finally came to the realization after about a year and a half of coaching in that league that, hey, these guys are starting at the bottom, just like these players are, just like I am. And they're trying to make a living doing this. So, you know what? I'm going to make it easier for them. And I'm going to treat them a little bit better than they probably get treated in most other cities. And I tried my best to do that. So, like Kevin said, I'd put food in there before the game for them. And after the game, I'd always bring beer in for them. Like I said, win or lose. There was the odd time I might have said, well, that wasn't a very good game for you guys. But anyway, here's your beer. Have a good night. Something like that. But no, it was a lot of fun. It was good. I got to know them. That was the best part, was I got to know all these guys, Terry Koharski and all these guys that were refereeing in that league. And later on in the American League and so on, I got to cross paths with them again. And so we had pretty good relationships.
Yeah. Now, Kev, now after doing this for a while, did you have a different perspective towards referees in general after being one yourself?
I didn't realize how much pressure the referees felt during the game, especially in the old one referee system. There was a lot of pressure to perform well, and I wouldn't say manage the game. It was just trying to, there was so many things going on. As a player, you don't realize that the officials are watching 10 guys at once. Mm-hmm. You've got to see everything in front of you, behind you, beside you, deal with the coaches, deal with the TV, deal with the guys in the penalty box running the clock. There was so much to it that I didn't realize went on as an official. I gained a lot of respect for them after I did that. It's a very difficult pressure cooker job. But, it was also fun for me. I have to say I enjoyed it. I felt like, especially when you get back to the NHL as an official, you have that sense of pride that you've made it to the top of your profession again.
Now, what was some of the chirps from players? Some players must have given you a hard time. What were some of the better chirps you heard from the benches or from some of the players coming at you?
I don't know if I can say them.
Oh, you can. No filter here in this show.
No. I can't remember who said it, but there was one I'll never forget. Somebody yelled at me and he said, "Hey, ref, get off your knees. You're blowing a good game."
I've never heard that one before.
I like that one.
I actually stopped, turned around and said, that was funny. I had never heard that one before, but you get comments like that. The superstars, I didn't realize how hard it was to deal with the superstars. They commanded so much respect from the officials, because when we played, it was only the captain and the assistant that could talk to the officials. As time went on and I started getting officiating, it started getting really verbally abusive towards the officials.
Yeah.
So they cracked, Gary Bettman cracked down on that, him and the guys in the Toronto office, Montreal office. Berkey was the director of player operations back then. It got really, really bad. I think it was the years when Chris Draper got cross-checked from behind by Lemieux.
Mm-hmm.
Right in those years, like the coaches started going crazy on the bench, throwing things on the ice, coming after the officials. It really got messy.
Yeah.
But they've cleaned it up now. I think the officials, you look at them now, you don't see guys verbally abusing the officials. You don't see all the shenanigans that used to go on. I mean, because they're really decent guys, the officials, and it's a hard life. The NHL stands for no home life, because there's really no home games. You're always on the road.
Yeah. Well, just going back to your playing days, but I want to we just got a couple minutes left here. Was there a player that you admired by the way he carried himself, not only on the ice, but off the ice, dealing with the ups and downs of being a professional hockey player, and just how he just related to life in general?
Other than me.
Yeah,
other than Squid.
Other than Squid, well, Squid was very well respected because he was a legitimate superstar. But there was a lot of guys, like I said earlier, Clark Gillies, I thought was a true gentleman. Lindy Ruff, Mike Foligno, Mike Ramsey, incredible guys. There's so many. You hate to think you're leaving a couple guys out. But when I got into the Players Association and we were going through the Alan Eagleson days, there were some guys like Doug Wilson, like an absolute gem. Mike Liu, an absolute gem. Really decent, smart, caring guys. Brian Trottier, just real leaders.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Squid, final thoughts before we let Kev go?
Well, I just want to get one thing in before you let me go.
Oh, please do.
We had a friend of the family pass away from COVID. So I just wanted to mention his name and wish his family best wishes and our regrets. So he was the biggest Leaf fan you'll ever imagine. He had a basement like yours. He had all the memorabilia. He walked around. His name was Bruno Sposato. He was 54 years old, born in Toronto, lived in Richmond Hill, and he wore nothing but Toronto Maple Leaf gear everywhere he went. So he was good friends of the family, especially Perry Lansing, my cousin. So he'll be dearly missed, and may God rest his soul.
Here, here, here.
Yeah,
all the best to
absolutely.
Bruno and his family, Bruno's family from us.
Thank you.
Squid?
No, now we're getting, I'll just quickly try and tell this story. And I learned really quickly when I got into coaching that, yelling at the referees and waving your hands wasn't doing any good. So Terry Koharski's doing the game. He calls 3 really bad calls against us in a row. So I call him over. I go like this. So Terry comes over, and I can see him. He goes like this as he's skating over. So, I put my hands in my pocket, and I said, "Hey, Terry," I said, "look at that blonde over there beside the penalty box." And he goes to turn around. I said, "Don't turn around." I said, "You can't do that." I said, but look at her. You got to take a look at her. And I go, and then so he's getting ready to go, and I said, "Oh, by the way, those were 3 shitty calls." So he goes to the penalty box like he's telling the timekeeper something, and he looks over and he looks at the lady who's sitting there, and then he looks over at me and he goes like this, wow. So then we got 3 calls in a row right after that. I thought that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me as a coach when that happened.
Well, on that note, we do have to say goodbye. Kev, we want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and thanks for joining us, and best of luck going forward, and hopefully we get a Leaf win tonight.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks, Kev.